The afternoon sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting long shadows across the wooden table where Nancy sat grading papers. The red pen in her hand moved methodically across each student's work, her brow furrowing as she corrected mathematical errors. Teaching high school algebra wasn't glamorous, but it had paid the bills while she raised Lily on her own. Nancy glanced at the clock, 4:37 p.m. Lily would probably call soon. Her daughter always checked in on Tuesdays after her biochemistry lab. Such a responsible girl, Nancy thought with a small smile. 23 years old and already more put together than Nancy had ever been. The phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the peaceful quiet of the kitchen. Nancy reached for it absently, her mind still half focused on the equation she'd been reviewing. "Hello, Matthews residence," she answered, tucking the phone between her ear and shoulder as she made another mark on the paper. "Mrs. Matthews, this is Officer Parker with the County Police Department." Something in his voice, a certain heaviness, made Nancy's hand freeze mid-correction. Police didn't call with good news. "Yes, this is she," Nancy replied, her voice suddenly thin. The red pen slipped from her fingers and rolled across the table. "Ma'am, I'm very sorry to inform you that there's been a serious accident on Highway 16. The officer paused, and in that pause, Nancy felt the world begin to tilt. A vehicle was involved in a collision with a semi-truck that crossed the center line. We found identification belonging to Lily Matthews at the scene. Nancy's free hand gripped the edge of the table. "No," she whispered. "There must be some mistake. Lily's at the university. She has lab on Tuesdays. The accident occurred approximately 2 hours ago, ma'am. The victim was transported to County General, but..." Another pause. "I'm deeply sorry, but she didn't survive her injuries." The kitchen began to spin around Nancy. Her chest tightened as if a great weight had been placed upon it. "This can't be right," she insisted, her voice rising. "My daughter is fine. She's fine. We need someone to come to the hospital to formally identify her. Mrs. Matthews, is there someone who could drive you? You shouldn't be alone right now." The officer's words seemed to come from far away, as if he were speaking to her from the bottom of a well. Nancy's mind raced through memories, Lily's first wobbly steps across this very kitchen floor, the gap-toothed smile when she lost her front teeth, her graduation cap flying into the air just last year. 23, Nancy murmured. "She's only 23. Ma'am, are you all right? Mrs. Matthews." The phone slipped from Nancy's grasp, clattering onto the kitchen table. She stared blankly at the wall where a collection of photos hung, Lily's whole life displayed in chronological order. Her first day of kindergarten, middle school science fair where she'd won first place with her project on plant photosynthesis, high school graduation, college acceptance letter day. Nancy's eyes fixed on the most recent photo, Lily standing proudly outside the university medical building. "I'm going to be a doctor, Mom," she declared that day. "I'm going to help people." Now those dreams would never come true. With trembling fingers, Nancy picked up the phone again. "I'll come," she whispered. "I need to see my daughter." After writing down the details in handwriting she barely recognized as her own, Nancy hung up and immediately dialed Lily's number. The call went straight to voicemail. "Lily, baby, please call me back," she begged, her voice breaking. "There's been some terrible mistake. Please call me." Nancy tried 2 more times, leaving increasingly desperate messages. Then she sat motionless at the kitchen table, surrounded by half-graded papers and the shattered pieces of her world. Just yesterday, they'd argued over the phone. Lily wanted to take a year off before medical school to travel abroad with the volunteer medical program. Nancy had called it irresponsible, a waste of her potential. "Medical schools don't look kindly on gaps in education," she'd lectured. Now those words tasted like poison in her mouth. Outside, rain began to fall, pattering gently against the windows as if the sky itself had begun to weep. Nancy finally stood up, her legs unsteady beneath her. She needed to go to the hospital. She needed to prove them wrong. Because a world without Lily in it was simply unimaginable. Nancy couldn't remember getting into her car. She sat behind the wheel, keys in the ignition, with no memory of locking the house or walking down the driveway. The rain had picked up, drumming against the roof and streaming down the windshield in tiny rivers. Her hands shook so badly she had to try 3 times before the keys slid into place. This isn't happening, she whispered to herself, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. This is just a horrible mistake. The drive to County General Hospital normally took 20 minutes. Today, it felt both endless and far too quick. Nancy drove on autopilot, her mind racing with possibilities. Maybe Lily had lost her purse earlier that day. Maybe someone else had been driving her car. Maybe the police had the wrong Lily Matthews. It was a common enough name, wasn't it? At a red light, Nancy pulled out her phone and dialed Lily's number again. The familiar outgoing message played in her ear. "Hey, this is Lily. I'm probably in lab or studying. Leave a message and I'll call back when I can." The sound of her daughter's cheerful voice sent a fresh wave of pain through Nancy's chest. "Lily, honey, please call me as soon as you get this. It's an emergency." Nancy's voice cracked. "Please, baby, just call me." She tried Lily's roommate next, then her boyfriend Tom. Neither answered. Nancy left frantic messages for both, asking if they'd seen Lily today. With each unanswered call, the cold reality began to settle more firmly around her shoulders. The hospital loomed ahead, its windows glowing against the darkening sky. Nancy parked haphazardly, not caring if she took up 2 spaces. In the lobby, a young receptionist looked up as Nancy approached the desk, her hair and clothes damp from the rain. "I'm Nancy Matthews," she said, her voice barely audible. "The police called me about my daughter, Lily." Recognition and pity flashed across the receptionist's face. "Yes, Mrs. Matthews. Let me call Dr. Wong, the medical examiner. He's expecting you." Nancy stood motionless in the busy lobby, watching nurses and doctors hurry past. A family laughed together near the gift shop. A child played with a toy car on the floor. Normal life continuing all around her while her world collapsed. Dr. Wong appeared a few minutes later, a small man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mrs. Matthews, I'm Dr. Wong. If you'll come with me, please." They walked in silence to an elevator. Nancy noticed irrelevant details with startling clarity: the scuff marks on the floor, a water stain on Dr. Wong's lab coat sleeve, the flickering fluorescent light in the elevator. Her mind seemed desperate to focus on anything but why she was here. "Mrs. Matthews," Dr. Wong said gently as they descended to the basement level, "I should prepare you. Identifying a loved one is never easy, but in this case," he hesitated. "The accident was severe. The victim sustained significant facial trauma. We've made her presentable, but you should be prepared for what you'll see." Nancy stared at the doctor, struggling to connect his words with her daughter. Lily, with her bright smile and the tiny dimple in her left cheek. Lily, who braided her hair every morning while reciting anatomy terms to herself. "It's not her," Nancy said suddenly, with unexpected conviction. "You'll see, it's not my Lily." Dr. Wong nodded sympathetically. "Many people experience denial in these situations. It's completely normal." The elevator doors opened to reveal a sterile hallway with harsh lighting. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Nancy hugged herself as they walked, her wet clothes clinging uncomfortably to her skin. "Before we proceed," Dr. Wong said, stopping outside a door marked Viewing Room B, "I should mention that the identification is primarily based on personal effects found with the victim. Her student ID, credit cards, and phone were all in her purse, which was recovered from the vehicle." Nancy's heart sank further. "What about her phone? Have you checked her phone?" "It was damaged in the accident, but yes, it was recovered. It contained photos of the victim with you and others." They stood in silence for a moment. Nancy's last hope, that someone else had been carrying Lily's purse, was fading fast. "I need to see her," Nancy said finally. "I need to know for sure." Dr. Wong nodded solemnly and pushed open the door. "Take all the time you need." The viewing room was small and dimly lit. A simple wooden chair sat against one wall, and in the center of the room was a metal table with a sheet-covered form. Nancy's steps faltered as the door closed behind her with a soft click. The air felt unnaturally cold against her damp skin. The faint smell of disinfectant hung in the air, making her nose tingle. She'd never been in a morgue before, had only seen them on TV shows Lila used to watch. Those fictional rooms hadn't captured this feeling of absolute stillness, as if the air itself was holding its breath. "Would you like a moment before we proceed?" Dr. Wong asked gently, standing beside the table. Nancy shook her head. No, she whispered. I need to see. I need to know. Dr. Wong nodded and carefully folded back the sheet to reveal the upper portion of the body. Nancy's hand flew to her mouth, muffling a gasp. The young woman's face was badly damaged on one side, with severe bruising and swelling distorting her features. Her blonde hair, matted with dried blood despite the staff's efforts to clean it, splayed out on the table. She looked so small, so broken lying there. Nancy's legs gave way, and she sank into the chair, unable to tear her eyes away from the body. Dr. Wong stepped back respectfully, allowing her space while remaining nearby. "Is this your daughter, Mrs. Matthews?" he asked after a long silence. Nancy stared at the face, trying to find Lily in the damaged features. The girl's build was right, slender, with long fingers like Lily's. The hair color matched too, the same honey blonde that Nancy had brushed and braided for years. I don't know, she admitted, her voice barely audible. Her face is so. She couldn't finish the sentence. Dr. Wong moved to a small table Nancy hadn't noticed before. "We collected her personal effects," he said, gesturing to a clear plastic bag. "Perhaps these might help." Nancy approached the table on unsteady legs. Inside the bag was a leather purse she recognized immediately. She'd given it to Lily last Christmas. With trembling fingers, she opened the bag and emptied its contents onto the table. Lily's wallet. Her university ID card with her smiling face. A half-used pack of chewing gum. A small bottle of hand sanitizer. And there, glinting under the harsh lighting, was the silver bracelet Nancy had given Lily for her 21st birthday. The delicate chain held a single charm, a microscope representing Lily's passion for science. "This is her bracelet," Nancy whispered, picking it up. "She wears it every day." Also on the table was a phone in a cracked case featuring cartoon laboratory beakers, another item Nancy recognized instantly. Next to it lay a keychain with a miniature stethoscope and a photo of Nancy and Lily at the beach last summer, sealed in plastic. Each item was another weight on Nancy's chest, another confirmation she didn't want to accept. These weren't just similar items, they were Lily's things. Her daughter's possessions, unique to her. Nancy returned to the table where the body lay. She forced herself to look more closely, to search for the daughter she knew in what remained of this young woman's face. The undamaged side did look like Lily, the same slightly pointed chin, the same shaped eyebrow. "Would you like to sit with her for a while?" Dr. Wong asked. "Many people find it helpful to have some time alone to say goodbye." Nancy nodded numbly, and Dr. Wong quietly left the room, promising to be just outside if she needed anything. When the door closed, Nancy stood frozen beside the table. The only sound was the soft hum of the ventilation system and her own ragged breathing. This moment felt impossible, like something happening to another person in another life. "Lily," she whispered, reaching out hesitantly to touch the girl's hand. It was cold and stiff, nothing like her daughter's warm, expressive hands that gestured wildly when she talked about her research. Nancy sank back into the chair, her body shaking with silent sobs. After several minutes, she forced herself to speak, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet room. "I'm so sorry about our fight," she said. "You were right. You should see the world before settling down to medical school. You should experience life." Her voice broke. "You should have had the chance to live your life." Nancy wiped her eyes with her sleeve. "Remember when you were 7 and broke your arm climbing that oak tree in the backyard? You didn't cry once, not when it happened, not at the hospital. The doctor called you the bravest patient he ever had." She smiled through her tears at the memory. "You always were brave. Braver than me." Nancy lost track of time as she sat in the quiet room, sharing memories with the silent form on the table. She talked about Lily's first day of school, how she'd insisted on wearing mismatched socks for good luck. She recalled the science projects that had taken over their kitchen table year after year, Lily's face lighting up when her experiments worked. She remembered teaching Lily to drive in an empty parking lot, both of them laughing when she accidentally hit the curb. "You were always so determined," Nancy said, wiping away tears. "Once you set your mind to something, nothing could stop you. You were going to be an amazing doctor." Her voice trailed off as exhaustion set in. The initial shock was wearing off, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. Nancy stared at the young woman's face, trying to burn it into her memory, afraid of forgetting even a single detail of her daughter. As she leaned forward to brush a strand of hair from the girl's forehead, Nancy's gaze fell on the undamaged side of her face, where the ear was visible. Something tugged at her attention. She frowned, leaning closer. "That's not right," she murmured. Nancy had always teased Lily about her ears, saying they were perfectly made except for the tiny bump on her right earlobe, a minor birth defect that Lily had been self-conscious about as a teenager. Nancy had helped her daughter accept this small imperfection, telling her it made her unique, like a signature from God. But the ear she was looking at now was smooth. Perfect. No bump. Nancy's heart began to race. She stood up so quickly that the chair scraped loudly against the floor. Hands trembling, she gently turned the girl's head to examine the ear more closely. "No bump," she whispered. "No bump." She stepped back, her mind whirling. Could the accident have somehow altered this feature? No, that made no sense. A bump wouldn't just disappear. She moved around the table to examine the girl's hands. Lily had a small, half-inch scar on her left wrist from when she'd fallen off her bike at 12 years old. Nancy had taken her to get 3 stitches, and Lily had been so brave, not crying even once. The hands on the table were battered from the accident, but as Nancy carefully examined the left wrist, she found no trace of the scar she knew should be there. "This isn't Lily," she said aloud, her voice echoing in the small room. "This isn't my daughter." Nancy stumbled to the door and pulled it open, startling Dr. Wong, who was standing nearby reviewing some papers. "This isn't my daughter," Nancy repeated, her voice stronger now. "It can't be her." Dr. Wong's expression was sympathetic but doubtful. "Mrs. Matthews, I understand this is very difficult." "No, you don't understand," Nancy cut him off. "My daughter has a distinctive bump on her right earlobe. She's had it since birth. This girl doesn't have that." Dr. Wong frowned slightly. "The trauma from the accident. And Lily has a scar on her left wrist from a childhood accident. This girl has no scar there." Nancy's words tumbled out faster now. "And there should be a small tattoo on her ribcage. A DNA double helix she got last year after deciding on medical school. We need to check for that too." The doctor hesitated, then nodded. "Let me take a look." They returned to the viewing room together. Dr. Wong examined the ear carefully, then checked the wrist. His professional demeanor couldn't quite hide his growing concern. "You're certain about these identifying marks?" he asked. "I'm her mother," Nancy replied simply. "I know every inch of my daughter's body. I bathed her, bandaged her scrapes, applied sunscreen to her skin for years. Yes, I'm certain." Dr. Wong straightened up. "We'll need to conduct additional tests. Fingerprints, dental records if possible." He looked at Nancy with new respect. "It's rare, but misidentifications do happen, especially in severe accidents when primary identification is based on personal effects rather than direct recognition." Hope flared in Nancy's chest, so intense it made her dizzy. She gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. "If this isn't Lally, then where is she?" Nancy asked, her mind already racing ahead. Why were her things in this girl's possession? Who is this poor girl? Dr. Wong placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "One step at a time, Mrs. Matthews. Let's confirm your suspicions first with some additional tests. Would you be able to provide us with your daughter's dental records? And perhaps something with her fingerprints?" Nancy nodded, clinging to the tiny spark of hope that had ignited within her. Yes, I can do that." As she followed Dr. Wong out of the room, Nancy couldn't help looking back at the young woman on the table. If this wasn't Lily, then who was she? And why had fate brought them together in this terrible way? The hospital waiting room felt different now. Nancy sat perched on the edge of a vinyl chair, clutching a foam cup of untouched coffee that a kind nurse had pressed into her hands. The heavy blanket of grief had lifted slightly, replaced by a nervous energy that made it impossible to sit still. She kept checking her phone, willing it to ring with news about Lily. Dr. Wong had promised to rush the additional tests. He'd taken samples for DNA comparison and sent an assistant to help Nancy gather Lily's dental records from her childhood dentist, who thankfully still had her files. They'd even found a water bottle in Lily's apartment with fingerprints that could be compared to the bodies. Nancy's best friend, Patty, sat beside her, having rushed to the hospital after Nancy called her with the news. Patty had known Lily since she was born and had been as shocked as Nancy at the possibility of a misidentification. "What if I'm wrong?" Nancy whispered, voicing her deepest fear. "What if I'm just in denial and making up differences that aren't there?" Patty squeezed her hand. "You're her mother, Nancy. You know her better than anyone. If you say there are differences, then there are." Nancy nodded, trying to hold on to that certainty. She'd spent 23 years memorizing every detail of her daughter. How could she be wrong about something as obvious as a missing ear bump or scar? "But if it's not Lily," Nancy said, "then whose daughter is it? Some other mother is out there, not knowing her child is gone." The thought made her stomach twist with sadness. "And where is Lily?" Patty added gently. "Why were her things with this other girl?" Before Nancy could respond, Dr. Wong appeared in the doorway, his expression carefully neutral. Nancy stood up immediately, her heart pounding. "Mrs. Matthews, could you come with me, please?" he asked. Nancy and Patty followed him to a small conference room where a police officer was waiting. The same Officer Parker who had called her earlier with the news of the accident. "Please, sit down," Dr. Wong said, gesturing to the chairs around the table. Nancy couldn't bear the suspense. "Is it her? Is it Lily?" Dr. Wong exchanged a glance with the officer before answering. "No, Mrs. Matthews, it's not your daughter." Nancy's legs gave way, and she collapsed into a chair. Relief rushed through her body like a physical wave, making her lightheaded and dizzy. "The dental records don't match," Dr. Wong continued. "Neither do the fingerprints. And we've confirmed the absence of the identifying marks you mentioned. The young woman in our morgue is not Lily Matthews." Officer Parker leaned forward. "This obviously changes things considerably, Mrs. Matthews. We now have two separate situations: identifying the actual victim of the accident and locating your daughter." "But who is she?" "The girl in there," Nancy asked. "And why did she have all of Lily's things?" "We're working on identifying her now," Officer Parker said. "The car was registered to your daughter, but the driver wasn't carrying any identification of her own, just your daughter's purse and belongings." "Could they be friends?" Patty suggested. "Maybe Lily lent her friend her car and purse." Nancy shook her head. "Lily wouldn't lend her car to anyone. She's too careful with it. And why would someone need to borrow a purse?" A chill ran down Nancy's spine as a more troubling possibility occurred to her. What if something happened to Lily and this other girl took her things? The room fell silent as everyone considered this dark possibility. "Let's not jump to conclusions," Officer Parker said, though his expression had grown more serious. "First, we need to try to reach your daughter directly. When did you last have contact with her?" "Yesterday afternoon," Nancy said. "We had an argument on the phone about her plans after graduation. She wanted to join a medical volunteer program abroad for a year before starting medical school." "And you haven't heard from her since?" Nancy shook her head. "It's not unusual for us to go a day without talking, especially when we've disagreed about something. But she always answers texts eventually." She pulled out her phone to show them. "I've sent her dozens and called repeatedly. Nothing." Officer Parker nodded. "We'll need access to her apartment, her class schedule, her work, anywhere she might be. And we'll need a list of her friends, anyone who might know where she is." "What about checking her phone records?" Patty suggested. "See who she called last?" "Already working on that," Officer Parker said. "We'll also track her credit cards and check social media for any recent activity." Nancy felt a strange mix of hope and fear. Lily wasn't dead, at least, not as far as they knew. But she was missing, which opened up a whole new world of worries. "I need to find my daughter," Nancy said, her voice stronger now. "Whatever it takes." The next 3 hours passed in a blur of activity. Nancy sat at Lily's kitchen table, surrounded by police officers who moved efficiently through the small apartment. They bagged her hairbrush for DNA samples, photographed her room, and gathered her laptop for examination. Nancy provided them with a recent picture of Lily, a bright-eyed young woman with honey blonde hair and a confident smile, her future stretching endlessly before her. Officer Parker sat across from Nancy, asking questions about Lily's friends, routines, and recent behavior. "Did she mention any new people in her life? Anyone who made her uncomfortable?" he asked, pen poised over his notepad. Nancy thought carefully. No, nothing like that. Lily's always been open with me about her life, even after our disagreements. What about her boyfriend? Tim, was it? Tom, Nancy corrected. Tom Chen. They've been dating for about a year. He's a graduate student in biochemistry. They met in a research lab. She pushed her phone across the table, showing a picture of Lily with a tall young man with glasses and a kind smile. I've been trying to reach him too, but no answer. Officer Parker made a note. We'll find him. A younger officer approached, holding Lily's laptop. Ma'am, do you know your daughter's password? It would help us check her emails and messages. Nancy nodded. It's her birth date followed by DNA. Science has always been her thing. As the officers worked, Nancy called everyone in Lily's life. Her academic advisor, her lab partners, even her old high school friends. No one had seen her since yesterday morning when she'd attended her biochemistry lecture. This doesn't make any sense, Nancy said to Paddy, who had stayed by her side. It's like she just vanished. Paddy squeezed her hand. They'll find her. A shout from the bedroom caught everyone's attention. Detective, you need to see this. Officer Parker hurried to the bedroom, returning moments later with a grim expression and a notepad in his hands. Mrs. Matthews, did you know your daughter kept a handwritten daily planner? Most young people just use their phones these days. Nancy nodded. Lily always said writing things down helped her remember them better. She's old-fashioned that way. Well, it might be the break we needed. He placed the planner on the table, flipped to yesterday's date. There, in Lily's neat handwriting, was an entry. 7 p.m. Meet Andrea at Blue Creek Rest Stop. Bring research notes. Andrea? Nancy frowned. I don't know any Andrea. The name doesn't sound familiar at all. Nancy shook her head. Lily never mentioned anyone named Andrea to me. Another officer rushed into the apartment. We've got something. Highway Patrol just sent over security footage from the Blue Creek Rest Stop from last night. Everyone gathered around a laptop as the officer pulled up the footage. The timestamp showed 7:15 p.m. There was Lily, recognizable even in the grainy footage, standing beside her car in the parking lot. She was looking at her phone when a dark SUV pulled up beside her. A woman with short dark hair got out, presumably Andrea, and they appeared to talk for a few minutes. Then Lily went to her car, retrieved a folder, and handed it to the woman. That must be the research notes mentioned in her planner, Officer Parker said. What happened next made Nancy gasp. As Lily turned back toward her car, the woman suddenly grabbed her arm. There was a brief struggle before the woman forced Lily into the SUV. Within seconds, both vehicles drove away, the SUV with Lily inside, followed by someone else driving Lily's car. Oh my God, Nancy whispered, her hand over her mouth. She was kidnapped. And the person driving her car must be the accident victim, Officer Parker added. They were working together. But who are they? And why would they take Lily? Paddy asked. Officer Parker was already on his phone. I need an APB on a dark SUV, license plate partially visible, looks like it starts with THX or TRX. He turned to Nancy. Mrs. Matthews, we need to know exactly what research your daughter was working on. It might tell us why someone would go to these lengths to get her notes. And her. Nancy stared at the frozen image of Lily on the screen, her daughter's face showing the moment she realized something was terribly wrong. She's alive, Nancy whispered. My baby is alive. Yes, Officer Parker said firmly. And we're going to find her. 5 days. 5 days of barely sleeping. 5 days of jumping every time the phone rang. 5 days of Nancy's world narrowing to a single purpose, finding Lily. The investigation had moved quickly after discovering the security footage. The woman in the video, Andrea Wilson, was identified as a former graduate student who had been dismissed from the university's biochemistry program last year for ethical violations. According to Lily's professor, Andrea had been working on similar research before her dismissal, research that Lily had since advanced significantly. It was a breakthrough technique for delivering cancer medications directly to tumor cells, Dr. Rivera explained when Nancy and Officer Parker interviewed him. Lily's approach was truly innovative. If it works, it could be worth millions in pharmaceutical patents. The identity of the accident victim had also been confirmed, a young woman named Paula Reed, who had apparently been working with Andrea. Phone records showed multiple calls between them in the days before the kidnapping. We think the plan was for Paula to drive Lily's car away from the scene to make it look like Lily had simply gone somewhere on her own, Officer Parker told Nancy during one of their daily briefings. The accident wasn't part of the plan. Every lead was pursued, every tip investigated. Nancy had barely left the police station, refusing to go home in case there was news. Dark circles formed under her eyes as she stared at maps showing possible locations where Lily might be held. On the morning of the 6th day, Nancy was dozing in a chair at the police station when Officer Parker burst through the door. "We found them," he said, his face alive with excitement. A hunter reported seeing lights in an abandoned cabin near Pine Lake, about 100 miles north of here. It's registered to Andre Wilson's deceased grandfather. Nancy was instantly alert. "Is Lily okay? Is she alive?" "We don't know yet. The tactical team is moving in now. I've got a helicopter ready to take us there." The flight was the longest 30 minutes of Nancy's life. The helicopter thundered over forests and hills, eventually setting down in a clearing where police vehicles and an ambulance were already gathered. Officer Parker hurried Nancy toward a command post set up near the tree line. "They've secured the cabin," a tactical officer reported. "One suspect in custody, one injured. We found a young woman inside who matches Lily Matthews' description. Paramedics are with her now." Nancy's heart nearly stopped. "Please, I need to see her." As if in answer to her prayer, the cabin door opened and paramedics emerged escorting a figure wrapped in a blanket. Even from a distance, Nancy recognized her daughter's walk, the way she held her head. "Lily." Nancy broke away from Officer Parker, running toward her daughter. Lily looked up, her face pale and drawn, but her eyes lighting up. "Mom." They collided in an embrace so fierce it nearly knocked them both to the ground. Nancy held her daughter tightly, feeling her warmth, her solidity, the unmistakable reality of her. "I thought I'd lost you," Nancy sobbed, pulling back to look at Lily's face, the face she knew so well, with the tiny bump on her right earlobe that had saved her life. "I never gave up," Lily said, her voice hoarse. "I knew you'd find me." The paramedics guided them both to the ambulance, where they sat side by side as Lily was examined. "She's dehydrated and exhausted, but otherwise physically unharmed," the paramedic told Nancy. "She's a fighter." "What happened?" Nancy asked, holding Lily's hand tightly, as if afraid she might disappear again. "Andre wanted my research," Lily explained, her voice growing stronger. "She and Paula planned to force me to help them recreate my results, then they were going to pass it off as their own work. They thought if everyone believed I'd died in an accident, no one would look for me." "But they didn't count on one thing," Officer Parker said, approaching the ambulance. "What's that?" Lily asked. "Your mother." He smiled at Nancy. "She knew the body wasn't yours the moment she saw it didn't have your birthmark. Her certainty is what launched our entire investigation." Lily squeezed Nancy's hand. "You always said that little bump on my ear made me special." "It did," Nancy said, tears streaming down her face. "It saved your life." As they rode together in the ambulance, Nancy held her daughter close. The nightmare was over. In the most unexpected way, through the darkest of circumstances, she had been given the greatest gift, a second chance with Lily. "I'm sorry about our fight," Nancy whispered. "You were right. You should take that year to travel and volunteer." Lily smiled weakly. "Really?" "Life is too short and too precious to waste a moment," Nancy said. "And I want you to see the world, to live your dreams." All of them, under the blanket, mother and daughter held each other tightly as the ambulance carried them home, both forever changed by how close they had come to losing everything.